Where does every NFL team's defense rank entering the 2024 NFL season? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch back once again live on BR to rank every NFL defense entering the 2024 NFL season. That's right. You will find out how good I think your favorite NFL team's defense is entering the 2024 NFL season. If you're on YouTube, give it a Gronk spike of the like button and subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more. If you're live on Bleacher Report, I want to hear from you guys live in the chat. Let me know where I'm right. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know if this list is accurate or it's horrible. I will say about the defenses list in comparison to the offenses list, we always see more turnover, more change, more development in defenses from season to season. We see defenses rise drastically based on new coaching, new scheme, new players, new draft picks, and a lot of guys that just simply evolve, right? Year 2 players that become better year 3 players, or year 6 players that actually take growth into year 7. Defense is a lot harder to predict than offense. Offense, we can list the best quarterbacks. We can list the best offensive lines. We can list the best coordinators. All of those are fairly common, the best receivers. But with defense, a lot goes into a great defense. So what I'm specifically looking for in a defense is not only the roster, the talent, the well-rounded nature of from front to back, a defensive line that can rush the passer but can stop the run, a secondary that can cover. I'm also looking for versatility, diversity within the scheme and the defense. I'm looking for the ability to cover and play the pass first and foremost at a high level and get after the quarterback. And then secondly, I'm looking at the run defense department, and then mixing everything together with what I know about these coordinators and the personnel on each team. I'm also a big fan on defense when it comes to depth. If you have depth, that certainly helps your conversation and ranking above a team or two if you're close in vicinity. So let's get started, guys. The top 32 defenses in the league from the worst to the best. Let's begin with the worst defense in the NFL, in my opinion, and that defense is none other than the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals defense, coached by Jonathan Gannon, was one of the worst in the NFL last season, and it did very little for me in upgrading. A very, conservative movement in free agency. Not a lot of additions up front, not a lot of additions in the back end. Sean Murphy-Bunting, a veteran that was added to the secondary, played in Tennessee last year, has played in Tampa Bay before. They added a couple veteran pieces to the front seven, guys that are marginal additions, like Justin Joneses of the world. These type of guys that are going to maybe help the floor of the defense, but not necessarily raise the ceiling. They also added Darius Robinson, a first-round pick late in the first round to help their pass rush. But to me, he's more of an interior pass rusher, really, than an true edge specialist, bendy, dip around the corner, get to the quarterback, get 12 sacks. To me, he's more of an effort player, a good run defender. So they still are missing like a high-end pass rusher. I believe it was Dennis Gardeck who led the team in sacks last year. That's not exactly a household name. Their linebackers are okay. I think Kaiser White had a nice season last year. But overall, this really comes down to a lack of a pass rush with a coordinator that wants to have an effective front four that can get to the quarterback in Gannon, and that being his style of defense that he ran in Philadelphia. I do think the scheme is a bit underrated. Since coming to Arizona, I thought that Gannon did some very creative things in terms of simulated pressures because he doesn't have the same level of talent in guys like Hassan Reddick or Javon Hargrave that he had in Philadelphia. He has lesser talent, so he has to find different, more creative ways of getting after the quarterback, but that also allows you to be exposed in the back end at times. I think they were exploited against the run and the pass. They haven't done much to fix either. They just have a bunch of young players that are developing and you hope take that next step, especially at corner and on the defensive line. I would say that the safeties are probably the strength. of the defense in Thompson and Budda Baker. Both players are very good tacklers. Both players are very highly intelligent, and they react to the football quickly. I'd also say that the effort level of this defense stands out. They do have some drives and some sequences where they just play very hard. So you won't count them out in any matchup. It just feels like they were overwhelmed last year, and they did very little to change the level of personnel that resides on this defense. So at number 32, the Arizona Cardinals. At number 31, one of the worst defenses from last year, I think will continue to remain that way, is the Washington Commanders. The Commanders were a bottom 3 team in EPA allowed last year on defense. And they do change their coordinator. They do change their scheme. They do change their coach. Dan Quinn is now the defensive guy on that side of the ball, obviously coming in as the head coach. He's going to have heavy influence on the Washington Commander defense. They also, unlike Arizona, added many pieces to hopefully upgrade the defense. But when you really look at it, there's just really, really weak points in the most crucial areas that you need to have good players in the NFL, especially in this defense. So Dan Quinn recently has been running a lot of man coverage, a lot of specifically cover 1, and kind of getting away from a lot of zone coverages that he played in Atlanta. And to have that style of defense, now he could always evolve and change and differ what he does. But to me, if he's going to have his most effective defense that he ran in Dallas, he's going to need corners that can cover. And this is arguably the worst cornerback group in the NFL. I think Benjamin St-Juste is not bad. They have a couple of younger players that are okay, but last year's first-round pick has already kind of flamed out. And their safety position, I do like the addition of Jeremy Chin, but then you kind of realize that he's only replacing Cameron Curl, who left to the Los Angeles Rams. Their safeties are okay. I just feel like they don't have guys that can cover consistently on the outside. They lost their best corner probably in Kendall Fuller, and they don't really have great edge rushers. And that was another key element of Dallas's defense. Obviously, they had DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. So having those two guys getting after the quarterback, along with man cover feisty corners on the outside that could hold up the receivers and get in the hip pocket of those receivers and provide tight coverage, kind of blanketed the field and really suffocated quarterbacks. The one area of weakness that the Commanders, probably will see in comparison to last year, I think their run defense will also take a bit of a dip. Maybe their pass defense will take a little bit of an upgrade due to Dan Quinn's system and Dan Quinn's ways of thinking, because he's aggressive. He likes to get after quarterbacks, and he's going to find creative ways of scheming up pressure, especially with Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne in the middle, Frankie Louvu coming from the linebacker level. There's going to be a lot of special things they do there. But in terms of the run defense, because they're a little bit less in line, let's say, or fundamentally sound with some of the things that they approach defense with in Dan Quinn's scheme, it's going to be a lot more kind of big gashing runs up the middle occasionally, where the lanes are just not filled because guys are coming on elaborate schemes and blitzes because they don't have great edge rushers. When Dorrance Armstrong is your best edge rusher on paper, that is a concern, because Dorrance Armstrong has been a third at best edge rusher on the Cowboys over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Clelin Ferrell also comes in from San Francisco. He's primarily a run defender. Allen and Payne can only do so much, especially considering they're not huge sack guys. Allen can be, Payne not as much. And then you look at linebackers, they did add Bobby Wagner to add some experience and some level of intelligence to the middle of the defense, along with recognition of Dan Quinn's scheme. But I think that's more of a leadership move. Wagner's not the same player he used to be. So overall, I just look at this defense and I say, yeah, they have good D tackles, pretty good linebackers, but the perimeter and the edges of this defense is extremely, extremely weak. And their pass defense is going to suffer because of it. And because of the way that Dan Quinn likes to formulate his pass rush, it's probably going to lead to some gashing runs as well. So Dan Quinn's Commanders are at number 31. They could prove me wrong, but that's where I have them. At number 30, the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons defense was actually pretty good last year. If you look at some of their statistics like EPA or success rate or even run defense metrics, they were actually pretty good. But this is more of a projection. All of these are sort of projections. Obviously, like I said in my offense video, the defense video is again like a projection of how good I think they'll be this year, not as much based on last year. But Atlanta is obviously changing coordinators from Ryan Nielsen to Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris has become the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only reason they will take a dip. I do think that Nielsen is probably the most underrated defensive coordinator in the NFL. I think Raheem Morris is a solid defensive coach. There's no doubt about that. But their schemes are pretty different. And I also feel like the personnel is just not there for Atlanta. Like, that's why they rank at number 30. They do not have a marquee pass rusher. Arnold Ebiketie, I believe, is the closest they have to that. Like, Lorenzo Carter is more of a hybrid linebacker edge player who's a do-it-all kind of Swiss Army knife, but he's not a great pass rusher. They don't really have any great pass rushers on this team, period. Right? Grady Jarrett is older. He's not a sack guy. And David Onyemata was probably one of their better, if not their best defensive linemen last year. They did lose Calais Campbell, who is a key element as well. He's gone. And I believe Bud Dupree played a lot of snaps for them last year. He's gone, although he's not the best player, let's be fair. Linebackers, I do think that's the biggest area where they might decline, just because both Landman and Ellis are two linebackers that very much succeed within that Nielsen system, where they're downhill, they're blitzing, they're getting after it. And I feel like with Raheem Morris, you need to be a little bit less downhill and a little bit more coverage oriented. I think Nielsen is more man coverage and aggressive, while I feel like Raheem Morris is more conservative and zone-based and bend but don't break. And while I do love AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates, the rest of the secondary is in complete shambles. They have players there that you wouldn't even think are still in the NFL. Like Robert Alford could be seeing significant snaps this season. So you just look across this defense, a lack of a pass rush. Their best players are older outside of AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. Like, their better players are Grady Jarrett, like David Onyemata. Like, they're in their 30s now. And so I just look at this and I say, lack of pass rush, lack of secondary beyond two good players, and really a lack of kind of consistency from the linebacker position, a new scheme change. I definitely feel like the Falcons are going to be found out defensively in 2024. They just do not have the personnel that I think allows them to be successful. At number 29, the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are, I think, a defense that was a little bit better than people thought last year, but still not very good. I think the thing about them that's unique and interesting is that they were actually like a top, like in terms of pass yards and pass yards per attempt, they were actually a good defense last year. But a lot of that comes down to like how many times teams actually pass the ball on Carolina, because everybody was leading against Carolina. Like, Carolina rarely had a lead. So one of their bigger areas of deficiency probably wasn't even exposed. Now with Carolina, I think they have a lot of solid players on their defense, which could make them rise on this list, but they don't have a lot of elite players. They maybe have two elite players, and that's about it. Like, Derek Brown is a very, very excellent run defender. He's not a great pass rusher, but as a run defender, he's amazing. He's arguably the best in the NFL as a defensive tackle. And they've got J.C. Horn, who when he's on the field can be capable of shutting down receivers. He can be a shutdown corner. If he resides inside this defense, Carolina is definitely going to take a step forward. Now, I do like their safeties. I think that Fuller from the Rams was an excellent low-key pickup. Jordan Fuller, that is. He's a playmaker on the ball. Xavier Woods is coming off his best season of his NFL career. They have Nick Scott, who they added as like a third safety, but the other corners are a little suspect. Troy Hill, who's a veteran who hasn't played well in a few years. Dane Jackson has been like the fourth corner on the Bills for quite some time. He replaces Dante Jackson. Don't know if he'll be any worse, but I don't think he'll be any better. The linebackers, Shaq Thompson's coming off a serious injury, although he's always been a good player. And Josie Jewell has played in this defense before. He's decent. Their edge rushers, I'm very concerned about the depth. DJ Wonham is already being placed on the PUP, if I'm not mistaken, or at the very least, he's injured. And Jadeveon Clowney is older. He just got a bag, and you kind of wonder if he'll be the same player he was in Baltimore post Mike McDonald. They don't have great edge rusher depth after losing Brian Burns. So that was a key element of their defense. And I like A'Shawn Robinson. I don't mind Tuttle, like in the interior defensive line. They're solid. But to me, they lack some depth in the secondary. They lack some depth in terms of their edge rush. I think that some of their players are due to regress, like Woods, Thompson, etc. So I could see them playing well. Evero is a solid coordinator, but I think it's going to be very up and down and very much based on how their pass rush is performing, because I don't really see any like true number one alpha 10 sack guy on this defensive line, kind of like Atlanta. But I do think that they have more reliable back-end players at the linebacker and the safety and the corner level. So that's why I have them like slightly above Atlanta. But at number 29, the Carolina Panthers. At number 28, the Denver Broncos. Broncos and the Panthers are very similar defenses. Vance Joseph coaches this unit, not really in terms of the scheme, although there could be some crossover there, but just like in terms of the personnel. I think both teams have very solid interior defensive lines. The Broncos improved that area by adding John Franklin Myers from the New York Jets alongside DJ Jones and Zach Allen, which I think is one of the more underrated interior trios in terms of, run defense, all around nature. Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers can both get after the quarterback. I think they have an extremely underrated edge rotation, which is why I elevate them above Atlanta and Carolina, because they have guys like Nick Bonito. Cooper is a solid player, as well as Browning. All three of these guys can have like around 8 sacks in a season. Their linebackers are not the best, I would say that, but they don't have bad depth. They have some younger players to look forward to there. At safety, they definitely lost Justin Simmons. That's a huge loss for them. I feel like safety is probably one of their weaker positions. I don't mind McMillan as the nickel corner, and I do think Pat Surtain is one of the better corners in football, which is kind of similar to Carolina and how they have J.C. Horn, but not a lot else at the corner position. So, yeah, I like Denver's edge rotation. I also like Vance Joseph in the way that he plays the run, and I think that he really figured out this defense over the last half of last season and the personnel and what works and what doesn't. Like, if you really look at the Broncos, the first half of the season, they were like the worst defense ever. But then if you look at the last half of the season, they were actually ranking in the top 10 in many categories. So if you look at somewhere, in the middle, it's kind of, I don't think they have the personnel to be a top half unit, but I don't think they'll be like a pushover by any means. So at number 28, the Broncos. At number 27, the Tennessee Titans defense, led by Denard Wilson, who is a new defensive play caller and coordinator. The Tennessee Titans, they're funky because I like their corners and I love Jeff Simmons. I like Harold Landry. I don't mind Arden Key. There's about 6 or 7 players on this defense, Amani Hooker, that I like a lot. But then the rest of the defense is like catastrophic. Like I don't like a lot of them. Is Jamal Adams, he's listed as a starter right now at the strong safety position. Good luck. I think Elijah Molden is probably going to take that spot, but that's not good in my opinion, regardless, right? The corner position, again, I like their corners a lot. I think just in terms of their corners, I think they have a very good depth chart. L'Jarius Sneed is an elite man-to-man lockdown player. Chidobe Awuzie has proven he's a good number 2 in the NFL, although coming back from injury, and he gets injured a lot. Roger McCreary is their nickel, and he's a very underrated, feisty corner. So I like those 3. Now, in terms of their linebackers, they have arguably the worst linebacker depth chart in the NFL. Kenneth Murray might start for this team, which just goes to show how bad they are. And, like their edge rush rotation is not above average for sure. Like Landry's capable of 10 plus sacks. Key is more of like an ideal number 3 edge rusher as opposed to a number 2. Their interior is Jeff Simmons and no one else. Like Sebastian Joseph Day is a name, but he has not been good in like 4 years. And, Sweat, they drafted out of Texas, but I'm not a huge fan of him as a prospect. So I don't think they have a lot of depth up front in the front 7. I think they're one of the worst front 7s in the league, but they have an excellent cornerback and secondary that can cover. And I do not mind Denard Wilson overall as a coach, from the scheme that he's probably going to bring there. So at number 27, the Titans, again, another team in that mix. Some of these teams are somewhat interchangeable. I just really like the back end of this defense. At number 26, the Los Angeles Chargers, my bad. Bolt up. It's the Chargers, not the Rams. The Chargers are at number 26, and it's similar to the Titans in terms of there's a lot of good areas, but there's a lot of really bad areas. Specifically, again, with the Titans and the Chargers. I really don't like the middle of this defense. Like, I think the middle of this defense is borderline pathetic. Their linebackers are, bad. I would say on paper, like Denzel Perryman has his moments, but he's mostly a run stuffer. And his play also has declined because of the style of player that he is. He's very physical, very, very much speed downhill, and that regresses pretty quickly in the NFL. Then you also have like Henley. Can he develop into a better linebacker? And then they drafted, I believe, Junior Colson out of Michigan, who he's a smart player, but I don't love his athleticism. So I'm a little bit worried about that. The edge rush is obviously going to have to carry this defense. If Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are playing on all snaps, and playing every game, they'll probably be better than the 26th best defense. But when's the last time Joey Bosa actually played like consistently? So that factors in a little bit. Mack is also coming off like one of his best seasons of his career, and he's in his mid 30s. So I don't really expect him to have like 17 sacks again. I like Morgan Fox, but I like nothing else about the interior defensive line. I also like the depth at the edge rushing position. They have a very capable run defender with a very complicated name, along with Bud Dupree, who they also added for veteran support. I like Asante Samuel. Christian Fulton is intriguing to me, who they added out of free agency from the Titans, but he hasn't played well as of late. The safeties are capable of being one of the better duos in the league with Derwin James and Gilman. Gilman was phenomenal last year. Derwin James took a step back. But the overall cornerback group is also a little shaky. It doesn't feel like they have a true shutdown corner or a true number one corner, and they're relying on a very shaky number two perimeter corner, along with very shaky linebackers and a pretty weak interior defensive line. So edge rush, a couple players I like. Safeties I really like. Asante Samuel I like. Morgan Fox. But overall, not a complete defense for Jesse Minter's first NFL season as a defensive coordinator. At number 25, you now know why I said the Los Angeles Rams, because I have the Rams at number 25. And big factors here. First of all, the Rams defense last year was not very good. They were in the 20s. A lot of people, I feel like, think they were better just because everyone thought they were going to be like the worst defense ever assembled on paper last year. Like if you looked at their depth chart before last season, they had like 7 players you've never heard of, like out of 11 starters. Like it was insane. But they lost arguably the best defensive player we've ever seen in Aaron Donald. They lost their defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, and are not shifting to a proven entity. They're shifting to Chris Shula, who I'm not exactly sure is any good, but we'll see. I do trust Sean McVay. I will say that. Now, I do like a lot of the young players, but again, this is a very young defense. We don't exactly know without Aaron Donald how some of these guys may perform at the same clip, like Byron Young, for example. Will he be the same type of sack specialist without the presence of Aaron Donald being constantly double teamed? If he's being asked to be the guy getting after it, like, will he be the same most productive player? Bobby Brown's in there as well. They added to their secondary, which I do appreciate. Darius Williams comes in, a former Ram, won a Super Bowl, I believe, with them, if I'm not mistaken. Good player. Also, I think that Cameron Curl adds a little bit to the safety position, although I also do like Jordan Fuller, as I've already mentioned. So I don't think that's a huge upgrade personally. On top of that, Tre'Davious White is also a complete wild card. He's coming off an ACL and an Achilles injury. So those are serious injuries. Lake is a solid player. I really like Ernest Jones a ton at linebacker. So, and then you've got Fisk. You've got the 2 FSU boys in the front, as well as the first round pick. So you've got, kind of just a lot of young players with a young coordinator and a lot of uncertainty. No more Aaron Donald. The question is like, how good is the pass rush going to be without Aaron Donald? Who's going to step up? And then the secondary is like, you've got some older veterans intertwined with some younger blood. Are those veterans still as good as they used to be? Because if they're counting on Tre'Davious White and he's no good anymore, like how good is their secondary really going to be? So yeah, like the Rams, I think they're solid, bend but don't break. I don't think they're a defense that's going to really like take over a game, but I think they'll be fundamentally sound. They'll tackle well. They'll play hard. I think there's a lot of things to like. If they play the same way they did last year, they're definitely a complementary style defense. They're not a defense that's going to shut down teams. If they get behind in games, they're going to have difficulty. But if they can remain where they want to be, which is slow down the run game, be elaborate and creative on third down, then they'll be fine. But they're definitely not like an upper echelon unit. But you also have to respect the upside that exists with all these young talents that could potentially take off in 2024. So at number 25, the Rams. At number 24, I have the Indianapolis Colts at number 24. Now, I actually had to make a change, which is why I was hesitant there to put up the graphic, because I had to make a change because they just lost arguably their second best defensive player like earlier today. So yeah, Epicam got injured, tore his Achilles like 10 minutes before I went live. So that's a huge loss for the Indianapolis Colts. And really the thing I like about the Indianapolis Colts is their defensive line. So you take away one of their best players on that defensive line in Samson Epicam, who is one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the NFL, all around one of the best run defenders in the league, had his best sack season of his career last year. Like, you take that away from the Colts, that is a huge blow because they do not have a great secondary. Like, I like Blackman at safety. I think that Brents has upside. Kenny Moore is a good, talented nickel corner, but this is certainly not one of the best secondaries in the league. This is definitely a bottom 5 secondary in the NFL on paper. So you combine that with losing a key element to their pass rush, and you significantly hinder yourself. Now, that being said, I was a huge Laitu Latu fan in the draft. So that just means more snaps for Laitu Latu, who's going to be, I think, like near 10 sacks as a rookie. I think he's going to be that good and that productive early. Kwity Paye is still there. DeForest Buckner is still there, obviously. Grover Stewart is an excellent run defender. He's there. They brought in Davis from the Miami Dolphins. He's also a good run defender. So they've got enough depth, especially if they sign like another veteran pass rusher to kind of replace Samson Epicam, especially a good run defender. That would be helpful. Then I would feel a little bit better about that. Their linebackers are fast. They're athletic. They're not, prime Shaq Leonard, but Speed is a good player. I really like him. I think that he flies around. Franklin is also pretty solid as well. So I like their linebackers. I just feel like their secondary, they're not going to be under Gus Bradley, the most elaborate or creative defense. We've seen their defense for years. Like, they're very fundamentally tackling. Like, that's what they do. They don't play a ton of elaborate different coverages. They play their cover 3. They play their quarters coverage. They sprinkle in cover 1. They don't do a lot. That's crazy. They rarely blitz. They rely on their 4-man rush to get after it. But against the run, they're usually pretty darn solid because they have that extra player usually filling in from the safety position. Blackman typically, although he could play free safety. And so I think the Colts are kind of limited by scheme in some manner. Like, if Gus Bradley, if I were talking about him like 10 years ago, he's like one of the best coordinators in the league. But 10 years after the Legion of Boom, he's kind of like behind the times. So I think they're limited by scheme. I think they're limited by secondary and cornerback talent. They definitely get hindered by Epicam going down. But overall, I do really like the front 7. And I do think there's young, promising players in the secondary. So at number 24, the Indianapolis Colts. At number 23, I've got a very similar defense, the New York Giants. The Giants are at number 23 under Shane Bowen, former Titans coordinator, who I do like quite a bit. I don't think he's solely responsible for the production in Tennessee defensively, and he has seen a bit of a dip in recent years, which I think is part of the reason they moved on, along with Mike Vrabel getting fired. But Mike Vrabel was also a key element to the defense, I do believe personally, because he is a defensive guy. So Shane Bowen's a good coach. I will say that the Giants are pretty much like the Colts in terms of like their front 7 could be fantastic, but their secondary is like very suspect, like even more so than the Colts, arguably. I do really like Deonte Banks. I think that Banks is going to be an excellent player. And I thought last year he showed promise and flashes. They did lose Adoree Jackson. They did lose Xavier McKinney. Both players, I think, were still playing at a very high level. McKinney is especially one of the best safeties in the NFL. And they replaced him with Tyler Nubin a rookie out of Minnesota. So we'll see how that looks. They also added another rookie who's expected to start. So multiple rookies expected to start here. Borderline replacement level players starting at other secondary positions, right? Perimeter corner, I believe Flott might be slotted for that position. I don't even know, is Jalen Mills starting, or he's at least in the rotation? So their safeties, their secondary is not very good, definitely. But when you have Dexter Lawrence, who's probably the best nose tackle in the NFL, Brian Burns, who's an excellent edge rusher who they added this offseason, you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who's capable of 12 sacks. You have, a really, really good linebacker in Bobby Okereke, who I believe that's how you properly pronounce his name. I've never figured it out. Even a guy like Isaiah Simmons, I thought played very well last year. So they have some good linebackers, some athletic linebackers that can cover the middle of the field. They've got edge rushers that can dominate a game. Even Ojulari comes off the bench. And then an absolute monster in the middle of their defensive line and Dexter Lawrence. I think that creates for, some things that Bowen can really get creative with, especially with his pressure packages. But with Bowen, he's also very much struggled with his secondaries in Tennessee and developing those players and, having good coverage on the back end. So expect the Giants to have times of dominance, but also times of explosive gains allowed. So at number 23, the Giants. At number 22, the Philadelphia Eagles, the E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles. Vic Fangio is now in Philadelphia, hoping to fix what was a catastrophic finish to the Eagles' 2023 NFL season. They were so bad last year at the end of the year. Like, they were one of the worst defenses I, quite frankly, have ever seen in a playoff game. So bad. They could not tackle. They could not cover. They could not do anything. It was absolutely horrible. That being said, Vic Fangio is a good coach. Still, I believe maybe not quite his peak levels anymore of power and magic, but still very good. I think that they do have a lot of talent, especially, high priority assets spent on this defense. And there's no reason they should not at least improve to the level of a borderline top 20 defense. They shouldn't be catastrophically terrible. That being said, I also think they're somewhat overrated in terms of the talent. Like, people will talk about Jordan Davis, right? Jordan Davis was a first-round pick who I liked, good run defender in college, has done next to nothing at the NFL level, has been next to, replacement, right? Then you look at, like, Nolan Smith was a first-round pick out of Georgia. He's barely played, at all. Now, people will, think about the Eagles defense and they'll think, oh, they got Nolan Smith. Well, has he played? You know what I mean? Darius Slay is getting older, not the same player, still good, still, I think, a good number 2. I don't think he's a number 1 corner anymore. They did draft Quinyon Mitchell, who I'm very excited for. I think he'll be their biggest impact draft pick by far. I think he's going to be a very good player, but it might take some time and he might have some inconsistencies, right? Cooper DeJean could be very good, but again, rookie who they're expected to play a big role. They did bring back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, to the secondary. He could play safety or nickel if they want him to, and he was very good in Philly not too long ago. I will say that Avonte Maddox, I don't know, we'll see. He's been injured. At least James Bradbury is not playing anymore, or at least significant snaps. He allowed 10 touchdowns last year into his coverage, which was the worst cornerback play in the NFL. Their linebackers are another reason I'm down on the defense, just in terms of them being in the bottom 12, because Devin White has been horrible in Tampa Bay, and maybe he'll play better for Vic Fangio. I don't know. And they've got Zach Bond is the other linebacker who's been the 3rd or 4th linebacker on the New Orleans Saints. Nakobe Dean, who I don't think is any good. So again, Nakobe Dean was a huge name at Georgia, but he hasn't been good in the NFL. These Georgia guys haven't really lived up to it. I do like Sweat. I do like Huff, but Huff is replacing Reddick. So you would expect about the same amount of production. Sweat's a good player. Obviously, Jalen Carter's an absolute monster. And guys like Milton Williams is solid. They still have Brandon Graham, who's still pretty good. So they've got still a really good rotation of, defensive linemen and front seven players. It's just that their linebackers are really bad, and they've got some overrated players, and they played so bad at the end of last year. You do kind of wonder, and they're relying a lot on fresh bodies and young players in the secondary, which also has you wondering, like, how inconsistent will the whole operation be? But overall, the Eagles are like that one defense in the bottom 12 where you could certainly see the upside to be top 10 because they were that not long ago. It's just the fact that they fell off so harshly last year. It's hard to really say that they're going to be any good this year. So at number 22, the Eagles. At number 21, the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals defense, I actually personally like this defense more than the 21 position. Like, I kind of feel like they feel like, to me, more like the 15th best defense in the league. But based on how they played last year and based on the additions they've made, they haven't really done a ton to change the production that they had last year, right? Like, defensively last year, they were bad. Like, they were a bottom 5 defense in the NFL. They were a bottom 3 run defense in the NFL. They were not a good defense. Now, some of that had to do with Joe Burrow got hurt on offense, so that put more stress on the defense. Secondly, DJ Reader was injured last year significantly, so that really hurt their run defense. But DJ Reader is also gone now, so I will say that. Now, that being said, Sheldon Rankins helps replace him. He's a good, solid player that always is on the field. So that at least gives them a level of a floor to their run defense that will help. And their secondary was beat up last year, and their safeties were horrendous last year. So they did obviously evolve, change some things. I like Big Lou as a coach, especially in big games. That's why he's called Big Lou. And Cam Taylor-Britt, super underrated perimeter corner. Mike Hilton, one of the best nickels in the league. We'll see how DJ Turner develops as a number 2 perimeter corner in this league. I would like them to still add another corner, like, let's say, Stephon Gilmore or Xavier Howard, who are both sitting out there that could really add to this defense. I think their safeties have significantly improved, getting Von Bell back. He was in Carolina for a brief stint, along with Geno Stone, who was up there for interceptions. I think he was only behind Deron Bland last season for interceptions. So he's a ball hawk. He helps replace the true free safety of Jesse Bates, who they desperately missed last year. Linebackers, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are solid players, good athletes, good cover men, play on like every snap. You do wonder about the linebacker depth. If one of those guys does go down, it's a little bit suspect, I guess. The defensive line, I think, is deeper than last year. I do think that Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson are a good combination. Hendrickson's an awesome player. Rankins and BJ Hill are not bad. And then they added a couple draft picks to the defensive line. And they've got a first-round pick from a year ago in Murphy, I believe. Miles Murphy out of Clemson, who should take a step forward this year as like their 3rd rotation player on the defensive line. So again, the Bengals are one of those teams that they're at 21 because they didn't play very well last year, kind of like the Eagles. But you also see their talent, the level of coaching they might get this year. And you could see it coming together for them to become like a top half defense. It's just that there were defenses last year that have similar levels of talent with very good coaching that I believe really won't fall off too much. So it's hard for me to really place them any higher than this because of how they played last year. But at number 21, I have the Bengals. At number 20, I've got the Minnesota Vikings. This defense is led by one of my favorite defensive coordinators, Brian Flores, obviously biased as he's a former Patriot guy. But the Vikings defense was one of the shocking units of last year. I do expect them to slightly regress this season just because they were so good at the beginning of last year, and it took teams off guard completely with the style at which they played. But near the end of last year, they did start to decline just a little bit. That being said, I think they're still going to be darn solid. Like, I like the additions they've made, some of the pivots they've made in terms of personnel. Now, losing Danielle Hunter is going to have an impact. That being said, they brought in Jonathan Grenard. I think this was more of a move for the long term than it was for the short term. That being said, they did add one of my favorite underrated edge rushers, Andrew Van Ginkel. They replace DJ Wonham with Van Ginkel. I think that's an upgrade for the slight decline of Grenard to Hunter. I think that Van Ginkel is a slight upgrade over Wonum. On top of that, they also added Dallas Turner in the draft, who could be dynamic. I do expect him to take some level of improvement and development, though. He's more of a third rusher in year number 1. The interior defensive line, I don't think is the best. I like Harrison Phillips, but I don't really love many of the other players on the interior defensive line. Linebackers, I think they got some solid, underrated players. Ivan Pace had a very good year last year. And then they also added Blake Cashman, who had a career season in Houston. Intrigued to see him in this defense. Grugier Hill was also added in free agency. He's a former Flores guy playing in Miami. He could be like a nice, solid veteran that could fill in at times. Jordan Hicks was lost, though, for Blake Cashman. So, again, another kind of pivot or change in the personnel. And in the secondary, I wish they added more to this unit. I do think they've got 3 productive, good safeties that all contribute something a little bit different. One can play the nickel position. Harrison Smith can kind of do everything, right? They've got some good, Murphy's not bad, but I think their corners are definitely a little bit suspect, especially after losing Blackman to a significant injury. So the corners bug me. The interior defensive line bugs me. I think the edge rush is improved overall. I think the linebackers are solid, and I really love the aggression and the blitz-happy scheme of Brian Flores. They'll also be very solid against the run because of the numbers they put to the run game and because of their beef inside. But overall, I do expect them to slightly decline just because I think that teams will pick up on their blitzes eventually and torch them in the back end when they get some opportunities. So at number 20, the Vikings. At number 19, a similar defense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Todd Bowles and Brian Flores do have some tendencies that cross over with each other. Both are very blitz happy and pressure happy, and they love to attack quarterbacks. Now, both can be kind of fundamentally unsound in some ways. I think Flores may be a little bit more sound of a scheme in a defense than Bowles. But the one thing here is Bowles has a lot of personnel that's played under him for a long time that has a lot of cohesion and a lot of chemistry. The Bucs were actually a top 10 scoring defense last year, but in pretty much every other category, they were not a very good. They were like average to below average in like every other category. They also did lose Carlton Davis at the corner position. I do think that hurts. Devin White is not a loss. They did lose Shaq Barrett, who's still a capable player. So they lost a couple pieces, but I think they also added, I like Jordan Whitehead and his combination with Antoine Winfield Jr. That is low-key one of my favorite safety tandems in the NFL. I think their corners are fine. I thought that the addition of Thomas out of Houston was a savvy one for their nickel position. They definitely need to upgrade that spot. Hopefully McCollum can take a step forward, you would hope. Jamel Dean is still in there. Izine was pretty good as a rookie. Diaby was pretty good on the edge as a rookie. But one of the other things that bugs me about this defense is their edge rush. They don't have a very good 4-man rush. Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey are pretty dominant on the inside, and I'd expect Kancey to maybe lead this team in sacks this year. Vita Vea is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league, but the edge rush is very kind of underwhelming. They need Yaya Diaby to really take a step forward for them to have a productive pass rush. Nelson is more of a run defender. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has not really become a upper echelon pass rusher. He's been 4 or 5 sacks a year type guy. Nothing special there. So overall, Levante David, Antoine Winfield, Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, still some studs across the board, especially in the middle of the defense. But they're kind of suspect on the edge rush and the corner positions. I think Bowles typically has a good run defense, but he also can allow some big plays in the passing game. And I'm worried about the corner position and their ability to strictly cover people, especially when they go to man-to-man. But that's why they're at number 19. I think they're okay. They're nothing special, but I also respect them at the same time. At number 18, the Green Bay Packers, a defense with a ton of potential. Jeff Hafley comes over from Boston College, and I think this is the biggest reason I believe they'll improve defensively. I also think that they added a couple players I like, and also they should be healthier at corner this year. Last year, they had catastrophic injuries at corner that really hurt them in games. and they couldn't cover people. When Valentine was out there and Ballantine was out there, the guys with like the same name, they really couldn't cover. Like Jair Alexander is such an important element to this defense, as well as, also the number 2 corner. Like people forget they've got, 2 guys last year that they really didn't have at the corner position. So I feel like if they can improve at that corner spot, that's going to really have exponential impact across the board. Nixon is a pretty good nickel corner when he plays there. Xavier McKinney, I think, is really going to help this secondary with overall checks and balances, intelligence, tackling, overall coverage and range. He's just an excellent player. So I think he's going to have a huge impact on one of their weaker positions from last year and the last couple of years at safety. I also think that they made some savvy draft picks. I like Bullard out of Georgia, and I also really like Edgerrin Cooper, who's going to replace Devondre Campbell. Edgerrin Cooper is an assassin. This guy is fast, physical, hungry for the football. He is a little bit limited in his coverage range, probably as a rookie, but Quay Walker, that's the area where he is really best at. So if you put Cooper near the line of scrimmage as a impact player in the run game, and Quay Walker is more the coverage linebacker element, then that could be very successful. I also love the defensive line. Kenny Clark is still awesome. Rashawn Gary is fantastic. Preston Smith is still playing at a fairly high level. Lucas Van Ness could really, take a step forward this year. Devontae Wyatt could take a step forward this year, especially in this system. This scheme is a lot more wide 9, 49er based, which is exciting for these pass rushers. I think a much needed scheme change overall. They've got the athletes at linebacker to get this accomplished. And overall, like, this defense could really, really take steps forward. It's just hard to really calculate how much the scheme will have an impact on the personnel and how the personnel will fit and how much better they'll be. Because honestly, the Packers defense has not been like a great unit the last few years. Like they haven't. They've been up and down and all over the place. But I think a lot of that has come down to coaching and the usage of the personnel. I also like Slayton on the inside of the defensive line as a run stuffer. And even Brooks shown some promise as a pass rusher. So yeah, at number 18, the Packers love their front seven, love the scheme change. Think they made some savvy pickups in the draft and free agency. And if they get healthier at corner, they could be a really big riser on defense this year. At number 17, the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins are in trouble because their edge rushers are injured. Anthony Weaver is their new coach, replacing Vic Fangio, which was kind of a weird departure there. Vic Fangio actually did a good job with this defense last year, but it just felt like the players did not like him, especially Javon Holland. I don't know why, but anyways, the Dolphins, the problem with the Dolphins is when they're healthy, they're probably like a top 15 defense in the league. But the Dolphins are missing Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips right off the bat. And Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, if you guys didn't watch my edge rusher rankings, they're both top 20 edge rushers, top 15 edge rushers in the league. So you get rid of those guys early in the year. You get rid of Christian Wilkins for the entire year and the longevity of this franchise. He's now in Las Vegas. And you have huge question marks about the front seven early in the year. Shaq Barrett was brought in to help out that. He's not the same Shaq Barrett, not 19 sack, 2019 Shaq Barrett. So don't say, that. He's not the same player, but he can help replace some of those snaps, along with Emmanuel Ogbah, Chop Robinson, who was drafted. These guys can help replace that, and I do really like the depth that they have there. So that helps, but those guys are really good players. Linebackers, Long is okay. They're both linebackers that they have are usually injured. So that doesn't help. The defensive line, Calais Campbell was brought in. I actually like that addition, despite him being 1,000 years old. He's still playing really well, and he's capable of playing really in any system. He's played in every system. So like 3-4 end, or like 4-3 end, or even defensive tackle. He's played like every single one of those positions. So yeah, 5-tech, 3-tech, doesn't really matter what he does. He's still good. The other guys on the defensive line, though, I'm not sold on that. I think Tart was a nice little run defense pickup for them, but they did lose Davis, who is also a key element to their run defense. Zach Sealer is pretty good as a pass rusher, but he's okay as a run defender. Jalen Ramsey is still awesome. I like the Fuller pickup, but he replaces Howard. So, you kind of wonder how much that really helps or hurts. Howard's better in man, I would say. Fuller's better in zone. Their safeties, Holland is really good. Obviously, he's one of the best in the league. I think that the other safeties, though, Marcus May, Jordan Poyer, big names, huge names, former Pro Bowl caliber players, but older, not the same players. We'll see how they look in the defense. And Nick Needham is good in the nickel position, but terrible on the perimeter. So as long as he stays in the nickel, he'll be fine. And they also have, I believe, a draft pick from a year ago. I can't recall his name for a minute. Is it like Cam something? I can't remember his name. He's also a depth player that could come in and play a little bit. But the Dolphins overall have a lot of talent, but it's a matter of a lot of those guys staying healthy, some of those guys being very old, and you kind of wonder how much they may play at the same level or play lesser than what they've been. A new coordinator who I'm not necessarily as big of a fan of as I am with Vic Fangio. So some uncertainty all around, along with, losing arguably your best, most impactful player, Christian Wilkins. So some good, some bad. At number 17, Miami will be all over the map on defense this year. At number 16, Jacksonville. Jacksonville's at number 16. Ryan Nielsen leads the group. I think the defensive line is one of the more underrated units in the NFL if they have their four healthy. Eric Armstead has already, I think, had a little bit of an injury, and he was injured quite a bit with the 49ers last year, so that hurts my projection just a tad. But Devon Hamilton can certainly step in on his snaps that he misses. Roy Robertson-Harris is one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the league, and Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker are good edge rushers. I do have some questions about the edge rotation and the depth of the rotation, but their starting four is strong. I think that Devin Lloyd took a step forward last year and should only take another step forward this year. Oluokun is an absolute monster in the run game. Love his style of play with his reckless abandon. Andre Sisco is a super underrated free safety. They did add Darnell Savage to their secondary as well. Ronald Darby replaces Darius Williams. Campbell is a good corner on the perimeter who's capable of being like top 10 in the league, but he had a rough season last year with injuries, so that hurt him. But overall, I look at this defense and I think, when you think about what Nielsen's defense did in Atlanta last year, and you think what he could do with the talent that he now has in Jacksonville, you think of a top half defense for sure. Like last year, Jacksonville's defense was flirting with top half. They were a little bit inconsistent. At times they were top 10. At times they were bottom 10. So they somewhere landed in the middle. But I think with more consistent coaching and improvement on the defensive line and possibly even the secondary, I think that a couple of these players too, like Trayvon Walker, Andre Sisco, Campbell, these guys could really take legitimate steps forward in becoming legit players at their positions. So at number 16, I have Jacksonville. At number 15, the Detroit Lions, who might be the most improved defense in the NFL this year under Aaron Glenn. Now, what I love about the Lions defense is I love their aggression. I also think their run defense is going to be absolutely elite. So they brought in DJ Reader to help McNeil, who is an excellent defensive tackle. That's going to be one of the best tandems that you have to take notice of in 2024. Aiden Hutchinson is like a one-man wrecking crew of a pass rusher. James Houston can come into the rotation and be very capable. He didn't play last year until the playoffs. He was pretty good in the playoffs, but he didn't really play until the playoffs, so people forgot about him. That's why the Lions defense looked better in the playoffs, like against the 49ers and things, because he helped the defensive line for sure. But John Kaminsky is pretty good. Marcus Davenport was also added to the mix as well. So he got very solid rotation up front. The linebackers, I'd expect Jack Campbell to take a step forward alongside the man with the flow. For some reason, I can't remember his name, but he's like the Italian stallion, Alex Anzalone. There it is. He's really a lot better than I thought. His movement, his ability to cover, his range, a lot better than I thought for sure. But Jack Campbell, I'm really excited for. Barnes is a solid athlete as well. And then the corner position, Carlton Davis is the biggest reason I think they're going to improve, along with Terrion Arnold in the first round. So they had a first-round corner on one side, a legitimate number one corner on the other, who's played in many big games. They have Brian Branch in the nickel position, who is a great player, elite nickel corner in the NFL. I think both of their safeties are expected to take jumps forward in Joseph and Melanfonwu, both players I like. Joseph had a really good year last year, and Melanfonwu was awesome in the playoffs and near the end of last season. They also have guys like Amik Robertson, Emmanuel Mosley coming off the bench in the secondary, which will definitely help. So I'm just a big fan of the Lions in terms of the depth at all three levels. And I think their run defense will be elite, while their pass defense will be kind of shaky at times, but I think definitely improved. So at number 15, I've got Aaron Glenn's Lions. At number 14, I've got the Chicago Bears. The Bears under Matt Eberflus. They ended last season very, very well. Matt Eberflus does a good job in terms of technique and allowing his defense to play fast and fundamentally sound. He has a pretty good front seven. Now, I wish they had another really good pass rusher on this team. That's the one element that I think they're missing to catapult themselves into a near top 10 unit. But I do think that Montez Sweat was kind of an exponential impact on this defense. Like, he made everybody around him better last year, and he was night and day for this defense. Like, before him, they were like, they're not very good. Jalen Johnson's playing unreal, but they're not playing very good. But Montez Sweat, once he got there, man, they were playing like a top 10 defense. They've got two really good linebackers in TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. Edwards is like very, very fundamentally sound, very good tackler, always in the right position, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, while Edmonds is kind of the opposite. He kind of makes a lot of mistakes, but he also makes a lot of plays. So they complement each other very well. I think Andrew Billings is underrated. They've got a decent rotation of like young defensive tackles that I don't mind at all. I think DeMarcus Walker is a solid player overall. And I like the secondary a lot, which is the reason they're at number 14. All of them are young. Jalen Johnson is a top 5, if not top 3 corner in the NFL right now. I think Kyler Gordon could take a huge step at nickel, and Tyreek Stevenson had a great year as a number 2. He's very good on the ball. He produces a lot of tip passes, interceptions, things like that. Kevin Byard alongside Jaquan Brisker is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Byard's not the same player he used to be, but I think he'll add like a veteran element to this secondary that desperately needs it because they're all very young, and he should put these guys in the right positions. And Jaquan Brisker is really good. I love Jaquan Brisker, all around good tackler, good in coverage. An old school strong safety in many ways. So the Bears, I love the secondary, the potential there. And I also feel like they've got enough good players in the front 7 to make them a top 15 unit in the league. At number 13, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are at number 13, led by coordinator Patrick Graham, another former Patriot coach. I think he coached defensive line back in the day. But he now leads a Raiders defense that last year, by the end of last season, was firmly a top 10 defense in the NFL. And they did rank in the top 10 in, I think, points allowed or yards allowed, one of those statistics. They were in, pretty high regard last year. Like, they really outperformed expectations by a mile last year. And a lot of that had to do with Patrick Graham and his coaching, but also some steps forward from some players and some unexpected big impacts from some additions. So guys like Robert Spillane, who was unbelievable at linebacker last year for them. He is their best linebacker. I think he is one of the more underrated football players from last season. He made a ton of plays on the ball, more than expected. He's a vicious run defender. He's a big, angry linebacker. Diablo also adds a hint of speed to that linebacker combination. And I think the biggest reason I love the Raiders defense this year is their defensive line. Max Crosby is obviously a terrorizer of offenses. He plays on every snap, and he comes with a relentless approach on every play. Then you have Christian Wilkins, who I've talked about already from Miami, is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. He's a monster against the run and the pass. So you combine two players that are arguably the most well-rounded at their positions on one defensive line, you automatically have like a top 16 defense in the league. But then you have, on the other side, you got a really solid number 2 edge rusher and Malcolm Kuntz. I think it's Malcolm, right? Kuntz, who had his best season of his career last year, had some nice pressure numbers. If he could be a little bit more consistent against the run, you're going to have a very formidable defensive line. Tyree Wilson was their first-round pick, a top 10 pick last year. He struggled with injuries in his first year, but he has a lot of potential that is untapped. I like guys like Adam Butler coming into the rotation here. They're going to be good against the run. I know that for a fact. I'm excited for their run defense. And in the secondary, Jack Jones is a very good, interceptor of the football, very good at reading the eyes of the quarterback, very good at, making plays on the football. Nate Hobbs is a good player as well. He could play outside or inside. They do have a pretty bad corner two in Jacorian Bennett, who was a rookie last year. He was awful. But if they can improve that area, rather Bennett could be better, or they could add somebody there. Like, I'd love Gilmore. Again, I keep saying Gilmore for all these teams. I'm just a Gilmore homer and lover, but especially in this defense, being that Patrick Graham comes from the Patriots, it would make a lot of sense for them. And I think that would really secure their defense. Morig and Epps are a solid safety combination. They're not amazing. This is not Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, but it's solid enough. So the Raiders, they've got solid to good linebackers, solid to good safeties. Secondary corners they don't really have a number one, but it could be worse. Their D-line is awesome, though, and that's kind of what makes them number 13, in my opinion. At number 12, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints defense is just always a top 12 defense. I almost don't need to go to describe this defense, but really what I like about what they did this offseason, I think they added some depth to the defensive line. I think Chase Young certainly adds another pass rusher to this defensive rotation, along with Carl Granderson, who I ranked in my top 32. Cameron Jordan is still playing. Brian Brzee could take a step forward at defensive tackle as a pass rusher specifically. And the defensive tackle position, they're mostly run defenders, like solid against the run, but a little bit more upside there wouldn't hurt. They also got like former first-round picks like Peyton Turner, who hasn't done anything. I don't know if he'll ever do anything, but he's still on the depth chart as well, just to shout him out. I do think they improved linebacker with Willie Gay out of the Chiefs. He combines with Demario Davis to be a very good combination. And then you look at the secondary, where I think that's really I love their corners. I think that I almost had Adebo in my top 32 defensive backs in the NFL. He was really good last year, especially when Marshawn Lattimore was out. He was locking down fools left and right on the perimeter. A ton of ball production for him. He does tend to give up big plays, but that's just the way Dennis Allen's defenses play. They're very aggressive. So you've got him. You've got Marshawn Lattimore when healthy is excellent. You've got Alontae Taylor, who's solid. Tyrann Mathieu at safety. So I think really the back half of this defense, I'm extremely excited for. The linebackers with Davis and Gay, and then the corners with Lattimore, Adebo, Mathieu at safety, even some underrated guys at the safety position that are younger that I don't think many people really know about. Just look out for. They did lose Marcus May. I don't really think that's a huge loss, though, personally. So the Saints are a very, very good secondary, very good coverage unit, very good scheme. Dennis Allen does a very good job at confusing quarterbacks, and they're typically always good against the run. The one area that I think is holding them from being a top 10 unit is their pass rush. If their pass rush can improve, if Chase Young can add that spark, then they could be top 10 this year. But that's why I have them at number 12, along with some of the age concerns of guys like Tyrann Mathieu and Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan. That's why they're at number 12. At number 11, a defense that I'm higher on than pretty much anyone on earth, but it's my list, so you guys can complain all you want. But at number 11, I have the Seattle Seahawks defense. The Seattle Seahawks defense is that one defense that I'm that is that dark horse unit that is going to be really good this year that not a lot of people are talking about. The Seahawks have a ton of young players on their defense, and they've got now Mike Macdonald running the show, and Mike Macdonald is arguably the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. I think he's going to take this personnel, which already pretty, much molded to his scheme already, when you think about the type of players that are on this defense. And I think they're going to take off in a big way. First of all, the defensive line, I don't think enough people are talking about. with what they have. Byron Murphy out of Texas was the best interior defensive lineman in the draft. He's a stud. He can rush the passer. He can stop the run. He's going to be a stud. Leonard Williams has been a stud for like 10 years. And you've got Draymond Jones, who they signed to a huge contract last offseason. He is a pass rusher. He is a good pass rusher. So you got those three guys. Plus you got a guy like Jonathan Hankins, who for Dallas last year was like their best interior run defender. And once they lost him, they were like really bad against the run. So you could put Hankins in for Draymond Jones at times, or have that rotation of 4 that I think is one of the better in the NFL. The edge rush with Nwosu returning, who was their leading sacker in 2022, along with Boye Mafe, who was their leading sacker, if I'm not mistaken, in 2023. Both guys are capable of 10 sacks, especially in this defense where, McDonald finds matchups. Like Jadeveon Clowney had a resurgence last year. Kyle Van Noy had a career year last year. He's like 34, right? So you put these guys with their capabilities and athleticism in this defense, and it could be potentially scary, especially with more than just Justin Matabike being a primary threat as an interior rusher. And that's the thing I'm excited for with Mike McDonald and these guys, is he doesn't have to be like too reliant on the edge rushers, which is really in Baltimore what allowed them to succeed was an interior push. They've got guys that can rush the quarterback from the interior. So they're not really worried about having guys come from the edge. Darrell Taylor also, Darrell, he can get after it too on the edge as well. Linebackers, Dodson from Buffalo is an underrated pickup, and I've always been a Javon Baker fan. I think Javon Baker's more the Patrick Queen, really athletic, really fast, and Dodson is probably more of the Roquan, although nobody else is really Roquan Smith, but he's more of like the fundamentally sound, smart, savvy linebacker. At safety, Julian Love is very good. Rayshawn Jenkins is kind of underrated. I've always been a fan of him. Tariq Woolen is a ball hawk. Now, he's got to tackle better, but I do expect him to play, really well in this system. I think that they could have potentially a defensive player of the year candidate in Devin Witherspoon. Like Devin Witherspoon was excellent as a rookie, but he could be sacking the quarterback, intercepting passes, stripping guys of the football, like making tackles for loss. Like this guy could be defensive player of the year type candidate in this defense, playing in the Kyle Hamilton role, which I'm extremely excited for. And then even their cornerback depth with guys like Michael Jackson are not bad either. So the Seahawks at number 11, I'm extremely excited for this defense. I think they're going to take off in 2024 in a big way. At number 10, entering the top 10, we've got the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, quite simply, are just always a top 10 defense. It doesn't matter who they have on their defense. It doesn't matter who they lost on their defense. It doesn't matter what has happened to their defense. They are a top 10 defense. Last year, they were top 10 in points allowed and yards allowed. Sean McDermott is just one of those dudes on defense in terms of coaching. He just understands which players fit his scheme and how to get the most out of them. Now, when it comes to the playoffs, that's a different story, but we're talking about, regular season. And to me, the Bills, they're a good defense. I don't really see any holes with them. That being said, though, I don't really see any like superior areas of their defense. Like their corners, I guess, are really good. Like Rasul Douglas, Teron Johnson, Christian Benford, all are capable of top 32 corners in the NFL. So that's a really nice trio. Teron Johnson, one of the best nickel corners in the league. Rasul Douglas, a ball producer. And then the safety position, they shifted. I still wonder if Micah Hyde's going to come back because he hasn't been signed, but Jordan Poyer left. And I do like the Cole Bishop draft pick. I think that Taylor Rapp is a good player, and I think Mike Edwards was an excellent signing. He played well for the Chiefs, and he played well for the Bucs before that. Matt Milano was their best defensive player. They get him back. He missed like 90% of last season, and they've got good linebackers too. So I'm not worried about their linebackers. Their linebackers are always good in Buffalo. Defensive line, Ed Oliver and Gregory Rousseau lead the unit. I expect a bigger year from AJ Epinesa playing more snaps. And we'll see what they get out of Von Miller. Von Miller was absolutely horrible last year. I think he had like one tackle in the entire season. But in a rotation role, a year removed from an Achilles injury, he might be a better player in that role to add to their pass rush. And then also, the defensive line in the middle, Daquan Jones has been really good for Sean McDermott's defenses. So they have a little bit less depth on the defensive line than they've had in previous years. They have a little bit less of a known quality of the safety position, but I think they're younger. I think they're more athletic. I think they're faster, and I think that will kind of level things out. So at number 10, I got the Bills. At number 9, the Dallas Cowboys, led now by Mike Zimmer, formerly of the Vikings, and now he's going to be the Cowboys defensive coordinator. He was the Cowboys defensive coordinator, if I'm not mistaken, for the Bill Parcells Cowboys. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was a long time ago, but yeah, he's been around. Now, Mike Zimmer is a different coach from Dan Quinn. Now, from what I remember about him, he is more of he's less blitz happy than Dan Quinn, I would say, but still, 4-man speed rush. I think there's more in terms of what he'll bring to the run defense. I think fundamentally they'll be more sound in their run defense, and I think that will improve the defense. I do think, though, that their pass rush, their overall chaotic nature is going to decline, which was maybe the most fun thing about the Cowboys defense in the past couple of years under Dan Quinn, which how chaotic, how fast they played. They were so relentless. Micah Parsons was a huge element of that. I think that will be dipping a little bit. They'll be more calculated in their blitzes, probably a little bit more predictable, but also I think that's going to help them be better in their run defense. So I think it's going to balance each other out. So maybe slightly worse in the pass game, slightly better in the run defense department. This defense, though, still has a lot of good players. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Odighizuwa up front. You do wonder who the other defensive tackle is going to be on a consistent basis. Mozzie Smith has not lived up to the first-round billing quite yet. Defensive line, they did lose Sam Williams, I believe, to an injury, which does suck. So they're going to need somebody to step up in that rotation in a big manner to be that third guy or that fourth guy in the rotation. Like last year, they had Dorrance Armstrong, they had Dante Fowler. Typically, they have some veterans there that can really fill in, but they don't really have that. They're relying more on younger guys there. Linebacker is their biggest weakness by far. They don't really have an answer for that position. Eric Kendricks was signed. He's old as dirt, though, so I wonder how that's going to work out. He has been good in Zimmer's defense, though. Not going to lie about that. Now, what I love about this defense is the combination of pass rush along with cornerback play. So they've got Trayvon Diggs coming back with Deron Bland. Jordan Lewis is pretty good, too. Malik Hooker is excellent. And they've got, who's the other one? Donovan Wilson. So their secondary is really strong across the board. They don't really have any weaknesses. They've got one of the best cornerback tandems in the league. They can play man, they can play zone. And I also think that they're built for the Mike Zimmer size profile. He loves big corners that are physical. So Diggs is big and physical. Bland is definitely big. Physical is a different thing. I will say that they have that combination of great corner duo, great, secondary capability with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Odighizuwa up front, which is a lot of fun for a pass rushing perspective. So at number 9, I've got the Cowboys. Some holes, some losses across the board, but nothing to be too worried about. I still think they're a top 10 defense in the league. At number 8, I've got the Houston Texans. And you could honestly flip the Cowboys and the Texans if you so see fit, because Danico Autry did get suspended earlier today, 6 games. So if you wanted to flip these two, that's fine. But at number 8, I've got the Texans. First of all, I love D'Amico Ryans. I think he's an excellent coach. I think he coaches great defense. Last year, the Texans were great against the run, and the Niners took a dip against the run. I think there was one common theme there. I think D'Amico Ryans left, and that was the biggest change in the Niners to the Texans and all that. So, and the Texans, their personnel wasn't exactly overwhelming from a run defense standpoint, but they figured it out and they did a good job. Now, where I love this defense, I think that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to watch these two. I think this could be the best combination in the league. I also really like some of the depth, like Jerry Hughes and Derek Barnett at the edge position. That's pretty deep for a number 3 and a number 4. And then Danico Autry, when he comes back from suspension, to intertwine with Fatu Kazi in the middle. They could use another run stuffer in the inside. They did lose a couple interior defensive lineman pieces, like the guy that left to the 49ers that I can't think of for a second, former Texan and Cowboy, and I can't get the name. That happens sometimes. Linebackers, Azeez Al-Shaair was an addition that I think is going to be a big, impactful player. Fast, physical, 49er style, right? Comes from the 49ers, knows the defense already. And I really like the kid out of Alabama as well, Christian Harris. It's Alabama, right? Might have been Oklahoma. I can't quite remember. But really good coverage player. Very fast, very athletic, very fluid. These two linebackers are super athletic. So love the combination of really good pass rush and really fluid cover linebackers. And Jalen Petrie and Jimmy Ward are basically linebackers in their own right, are good against the run, but can also, cover, especially in short areas. And Derek Stingley could be a shutdown corner this year. They have to figure out who their number 2 perimeter corner is going to be. They kind of thrown everything at it, like CJ Henderson, Jeff Okudah, a draft pick in Lassiter. They tried a couple different guys. And then they also have Desmond King at nickel corner, Miles Bryant from the Patriots, who's a very reliable zone corner, I do think. So they've got a lot of depth at corner, but they don't really exactly have the right, the understanding of who the combination is going to be. Safety, I like. Linebackers, I like. Defensive line, I love. And overall, the scheme, it's like the Niners. So they love to put their resources in the front, right? So at number 8, I have the Texans, one of the more improved units going into this year. At number 7, probably the best defense last year, the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens are losing, key elements that made them successful last year, which is why they only rank at number 7. Plus, you constantly see regression in defense. But Zach Orr is now coaching it and not Mike McDonald, which is first and foremost. Zach Orr's former linebacker, I believe, of the Ravens at one time. I want to say around 2014, 2016 area. Pretty good player. But the Ravens, they have Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Justin Madubuike, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams. The middle of the defense, those guys that I just named, that is why they're so good. You can eliminate everything else, right? Everything else is kind of irrelevant. It matters, but it doesn't. Trenton Simpson will step up for Patrick Queen, you would think, although Patrick Queen is going to be a loss. And you'll see that in my top 5 defenses in the NFL, because the one that he's on is going to be in there. I think that Jadeveon Clowney, being their best pass rusher last year, from an edge standpoint, is going to hurt. Although Oweh, hopefully, if he stays healthy, could have his best season of his career this year. Kyle Van Noy is still there, but will he play the same way as he did last year? I don't know. The edge rush overall is a bit suspect. The interior defensive line, it's solid, but it's mostly Justin Madubuike and a bunch of run stuffers like Michael Pierce and Broderick Washington. I do like the kid out of Clemson at corner. I think that he'll play well, but he's a rookie, and he's replacing a reliable veteran in Ronald Darby. And Brandon Stevens is pretty good. I like him too. So I still like this defense a lot. But again, you lose Clowney, you lose Geno Stone, you lose Patrick Queen. So you lose some starters. And you also lose the best defensive coordinator in the league. You're going to regress a little bit. So at number 7, the Ravens. At number 6, the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers were if you looked at their stats last year, they were a top 6 defense, top 5 defense in the NFL. But they didn't feel like it by the end of the year, and they didn't play like it at the end of the year. Definitely not, right? But I do think they're going to bounce back. And there's a couple different reasons. First of all, the coaching. So they changed Steve Wilkes to Sorensen, who's a guy from inside who worked in Seattle in the Seattle scheme, worked in San Francisco under Robert Saleh, under DeMeco Ryans, has a very good familiarity with the system and the players. Secondly, Brandon Staley, who was the best, had the best defense in the NFL in 2020 with the Rams as a defensive coordinator, which allowed him to get the job with the Chargers, which he didn't do a very good job as a head coach and was heavily criticized. But as a defensive-minded guy, he's smart, especially when it comes to coverages. So I like that intertwining between the two of them. They also have the best defensive line coach in the NFL, arguably. So those 3 should make up for a solid foundation of a coaching staff on the Niners. Secondly, they have a lot of studs. Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga returns, Charvarius Ward, Lenore is a borderline stud. They've got a lot of studs, more than most defenses. That carries a lot of players, right? That carries a lot of defenses. Malik Collins, good player. That was the name that I was missing from the Texans. They got him to replace Eric Armstead. I think that's fine. Actually, I think that might be an improvement because Collins is probably going to be healthier because Armstead is always hurt. So that was a big problem last year. Leonard Floyd, I think, is a nice addition as a veteran to complement Nick Bosa on the edge and replace Chase Young, who was a very inconsistent element to the defense late last year. They've got a solid defensive line rotation, as always. And the linebacker position, adding Devondre Campbell to help replace Dre Greenlaw early in the year, I think was a nice little touch. Safety, Mustafa out of the draft is exciting, along with Brown, I believe, Jair Brown, who enters year number 2. Very athletic kid, played well as a rookie free safety. Hufanga, like I said, was really missing last year in terms of their tackling and their run defense. Charvarius Ward's an elite corner. Lenore's a good corner. And I think they improved on the other side. They added, a corner out of the Saints who Isaac Yiadom, I almost forgot his name again. I'm trying to remember all these names. Isaac Yiadom, who could play in any system, who had his best season of his career last year. And they added Renardo Green, who's a really interesting corner out of FSU. I think he should have been drafted in the 2nd round. I think he went in the 3rd. So, yeah, I'm excited. I think their secondary could be a lot better this year. And I think their front will be about the same as usual, but they'll have to get over the loss of Dre Greenlaw early. So they're going to be very, very good again. At number 5, the New England Patriots defense. Patriots are at number 5. I would have had them at number 3. But with Christian Barmore getting blood clots, I'm uncertain with if he'll be able to play at all this year. So that obviously, he's one of the best defensive linemen in the league, at least top 20. So that definitely hurts this defense. But that being said, this was a top 10 defense last year without Matt Judon and Christian Gonzalez. So if any defense can overcome losing a good player, it's probably the New England Patriots. They also just have so much depth. I think that's the impressive part about the Patriots defense. Their offense sucks, but man, all the resources has gone into the defense. Their cornerback position is really, really strong. They've got Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, actually Austin, look out for him. Alex Austin played at the end of last year. He's a good player. And then Marcus Jones returns. He got injured last year. So all the Joneses are back. Also, they've got safeties, three pretty capable safeties, but they've got Jabril Peppers, Kyle Duggar, who's one of the best combos in the NFL. Marte Mapu, you would expect to take a step forward from a rookie season to a second year. Tavai and Bentley are one of the more underrated duos at linebacker in the NFL. The defensive line, you've got guys like Matt Judon on one side, Josh Uche on the other. Anthony Jennings was one of the best run defenders in the league last year. Dietrich Wise, Keon White, Devon Godshaw. I mean, the defensive line is absolutely loaded, and that's not even including Christian Barmore. So, yeah, they've got a ton of talent all over the defense, and there's more cohesion with all the players now because none of them left. They're all still there, really. So there's no concern there. If anything, they were an elite run defense last year. They get their best pass rusher back in Matt Judon as long as he signs that contract. Hopefully Barmore can return, but I'm really excited for Christian Gonzalez. I think that Gerard Mayo, he's going to coach a good defense. I don't really care that Belichick left. The defense is going to remain the same. They have too many veteran voices in there that know what they're doing at a high level, that played under Belichick for many years. And Mayo basically was the defensive coordinator for this team. So I expect the same sort of productivity, the same sort of versatility, the same sort of creativity from the Patriots at number 5. At number 4, the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Probably the best defense in the playoffs without a doubt last year, and arguably the best by year's end for some people. They had a dominant playoff run. Kansas City Chiefs. Now, they did lose L'Jarius Sneed. They did lose Willie Gay. But, and they lost Mike Edwards. But they're still awesome. Like, I still think even with losing a player as good as L'Jarius Sneed, their corners are still going to be locked down. Like, I like both of Watson and Williams. Both of the W corners are big, physical perimeter corners. Trent McDuffie is incredible in the nickel spot. I think their safeties, Justin Reed, it doesn't get mentioned enough with what he does for this defense, but very good player. He even kicks the ball off. And Brian Cook returns. Linebackers are one of the best depth charts in the league with Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, and Leo Chanel. All bring something different to the table. Bolton's like the classic middle linebacker. Tranquil can play on the edge. He can play in coverage. And then Leo Chanel is a sledgehammer run defender. Chris Jones is one of the best players in the NFL, period. Charles Omenihu, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana is a nice 3-edge rotation. The interior defensive line is always a little suspect. They've been relying a lot on Mike Pennell against the run, but he is like really old. So I do wonder if anyone else is going to really step up on the D-line. And if, Karlaftis could take another step forward this year, that would be really significant. So overall, Steve Spagnuolo, excellent defensive coordinator. They can play man, they can play zone, they can mix it up, they can blitz, they can rush 4. They can just do everything really well. Their run defense is a little bit of a flaw, but that's really the only thing holding them out of the top 3. At number 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I think, is going to be the best defense they've had in like 3 or 4 years. First of all, I think they have the best pass rush in the NFL. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Ogunjobi, Benton. This rotation, even Nate Herbig, this rotation is ridiculous. I'm really excited for Cam Hayward healthy, for TJ Watt, for Alex Highsmith, and then not only that, for that pass rush, along with linebackers that can actually play, right? They got Pat Queen behind this pass rush. So now they have a free-flowing sideline-to-sideline linebacker that they have not had in years. That is such a big addition. On top of that, they added a linebacker, a rookie by the name of Peyton Wilson, who I loved. He was my favorite linebacker in the draft. He didn't go until the 3rd round because of some injuries and some age concerns, but he is an athlete. Landon Roberts is a great run defender, and even Cole Holcomb is very solid. So they got a very deep linebacker core, a very deep defensive line, one of the deepest in the NFL and one of the best in the NFL. And obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick is amazing at safety. They added a very reliable Elliott as the number 2 safety, or like the other safety. And that's an improvement, in my opinion. That allows DeMonte KZ to play as more of the 3rd safety and just the free safety. At the corner position, Joey Porter Jr. could take a huge rise as a lockdown perimeter corner, which is something they haven't had along with a linebacker in years. And Dante Jackson adds some speed to the secondary. I'm concerned about nickel corner. But other than nickel corner, I think this is an awesome defense. They turn the football over. They rush the passer. They stop the run. They'll play faster because of the middle of their defense. They've got an elite player at every level of their defense and every unit of their defense, which is why they're at number 3. At number 2, the New York Jets. Jets. The Jets are at number 2. And the only difference between my number 1 and my number 2 is depth and safety. If the Jets had more reliable safeties and more depth on, linebacker position, corner position, and safety position, I would be convinced the Jets are the best defense in the league. But I have them at number 2. Now, that being said, they have one of the best defensive lines in the league. Now, Hassan Reddick, can you please figure whatever's going on with you out so that you can get on the field? But Quinnen Williams is awesome. Jermaine Johnson, I love. I think he's going to have a huge year this year. I think Javon Kinlaw has been ascending as a player. They signed him. They've got Will McDonald, who I think is good. He just didn't play much last year. And Hassan Reddick. So an excellent D-line. Quentin Jefferson, I still think is there. Solomon Thomas, I still think is there. I mean, they've got first-round pick after first-round pick after first-round pick. Michael Clemens is it Michael Clemens? He's a good run defender on the edge. It's Clemens. I know that. I don't remember his first name. But I think it's Michael. There was another Chris Clemens a long time ago. I'm getting confused in my mind. But good run defender. So they got 8 or 9 defensive linemen that can rotate in and play well. And Williams, Reddick, those guys are elite players pretty much. So you can rely on those guys. Then you have probably the best linebacker duo in the league entering the season, right? Because the Niners, Dre Greenlaw's injured. So you have Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley who are unbelievable. Quincy Williams is like my favorite linebacker in the league to watch right now. He's just like does not care for anything, just flies around. And CJ Mosley is one of the most intelligent linebackers in the league. Safeties, they're not the best. But we'll see. We'll see. Okay, we'll see. They did lose Jordan Whitehead, but they got back Chuck Clark, I think, from Baltimore. They wanted him to play last year. He got injured. It was a mess, but so maybe they sign one, though. There's still lots of safeties out there. Like Justin Simmons is still there. If they get Justin Simmons, they're the best defense in the league. If they get Quandre Diggs, that would really help. Like somebody like that. Like anybody at free safety, that would really help my cause here. But Sauce Gardner is amazing. DJ Reed's one of the best cornerback twos in the league. Michael Carter's a really good nickel corner. They added Isaiah Oliver for a hint of depth. So they've got a lot at the D-line level, at the corner level. The main things you need: fast linebackers, free-flowing linebackers, a solid fundamental scheme that's not too creative, but it's very sound. So at number 2, I have the Jets. They really don't have any flaws. It's just that I wish they had a hint more depth, because my number 1 team, the Browns, has so much depth. It's absolutely outrageous. Like, I don't know how they kept the exact same defense that was the number 1 defense in the NFL last year, statistically speaking. And they basically didn't lose anyone. If anything, they only added like Jordan Hicks and a defensive lineman from Ohio State. That's basically all that happened. That's all that happened. So the number 1 defense from last year basically lost nobody. They didn't lose Zadarius Smith. They didn't lose Shelby Harris. They didn't lose Dalvin Tomlinson. They sure didn't lose Myles Garrett. You know, they still got our boy Oscar Agadabudububu as the number 3. Still don't know how to pronounce his name. They've got a million defensive linemen. They've got Maurice Hurst, who's really good, like in rotation. Hall out of Ohio State is a demon as a pass rusher. They have JOK at linebacker. They added Jordan Hicks as a reliable veteran. They did lose Taki, I believe, to the Patriots, but I mean, he's like their 3rd linebacker, so that's not a huge deal. The safety position, they've got 3 reliable safeties. Grant Delpit continues to improve, in my opinion. Juan Thornhill is a very good free safety, and Rodney McLeod has had plenty of experience as a safety as well. So they got 3 good safeties, 3 good corners, 3 darn good corners. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, and Martin Emerson are one of the best trios in football. So they can play man, they can play zone, they can stop the run. They're fast in the middle of their defense. They've got depth on the D-line like nobody's business. They've got depth at safety. They've got depth at maybe not corner is the one area. Like there is a bit of a drop-off there. But, man, they have everything. Like Schwartz is a good coach. They're aggressive when they need to be aggressive. They have an all-star at the corner position, an all-star on the defensive line. Like those fundamental players that really allow the rest of the defense to operate at a high level. So, yeah, at number 1, I've got the Browns still. The Jets could be the number 1 defense, but it's pretty close. So those are my defensive line rankings. I know it was long, but, you know, I had a lot to say, and hopefully I covered everything for you guys. So, yeah, I had to, Henry, I had to explain why they are not number 1. So that's why I was a little negative at times, but, you know, if sometimes when I'm negative, it's also because I'm trying to explain why I don't have them a little higher or something like that. But let's go over the recap. All right. So this is the recap of the list. At number 32, the Arizona Cardinals. At number 31, Dan Quinn's new defense, the Washington Commanders. At number 30, Raheem Morris's new defense, the Atlanta Falcons. Just not enough talent. I don't know how they were so good last year. At number 29, the Carolina Panthers, who lost Brian Burns, but have a very reliable defense. At number 28, the Denver Broncos. Vance Joseph may or may not be having the time of his life. At number 27, L'Jarius Sneed's new defense. A good secondary, but suspect everywhere else. The Tennessee Titans. At number 26, can Joey Bosa stay on the field? They might be better than 26. The LA Chargers. At number 25, the very youngest defense in the NFL, the Los Angeles Rams. At number 24, they just lost Samson Ebukam early today, but I like the D-line, the front seven, Indianapolis Colts led by Gus Bradley. At number 23, a new look on the Giants defense, an awesome front seven, but a very, very weak secondary. Makes it hard to difficult to rank the 23 New York Giants. At number 22, some talent. Vic Fangio hopefully improves the coaching, but a little bit of an overrated defense. Number 22, after a terrible finish to 2023, the Philadelphia Eagles. At number 21, I think they're better than 21, but I could only rank them so high based on how they played last year, the Cincinnati Bengals. At number 20, Brian Flores' aggressive Vikings. At number 19, Todd Bowles' Blitzin' Buccaneers. At number 18, the new and improved new scheme, Xavier McKinney added Green Bay Packers. At number 17, the Miami Dolphins, the retirement home of defenses. At number 16, the Jacksonville Jags, led by the most underrated defensive coordinator in the NFL, Ryan Nielsen. At number 15, the new and improved secondary surplus Detroit Lions. At number 14, boy, watch out for the Chicago Bears. At number 13, you do not want to mess with the Las Vegas Raiders, Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins. At number 12, the Saints are always a good defense under Dennis Allen. At number 11, my defensive crush of 2024. I think they'll take a huge step forward, the Seattle Seahawks. Entering the top 10, McDermott's Buffalo Bills are simply never not top 10. At number 9, the Houston Texans or the Dallas Cowboys, who I said are interchangeable, right? So the Texans or the Cowboys, depending on how much you put into the stock of Danico Autry being suspended for 6 games. So interchangeable. D'Amico Ryans is Texans, who I think young players expected to take a rise. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter is going to be special. Dallas Cowboys, Zimmer replaces Quinn. Probably a stronger run defense, but weaker pass defense. Questions at linebacker, but amazing pass rush, amazing secondary. At number 7, the Ravens lost some pieces and Mike McDonald, but they're still top 10. At number 6, the 49ers have way too many elite talents, along with, I think, improved coaching to allow them to get back on track in 2024. The Patriots may be without Christian Barmore, but they've been able to survive the losses of Judon and Gonzalez in the past. I think that the Patriots will once again be an elite defense with all the depth that they show. At number 4, the championship Kansas City Chief defense. At number 3, the Pittsburgh Steeler with, in my opinion, the best pass rush in the NFL. At number 2, maybe the most well-rounded defense in the league, the New York Jets. And at number 1, the number 1 defense last year with an insane amount of depth, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, the Cleveland Browns. So those are the 32 defenses ranked in order. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, you're on YouTube, spike the like button and subscribe. If you're on Bleacher Report, follow me here on Bleacher Report for more live streams just like this. And we'll see you guys soon. Peace, guys.